On this episode, we chat with Khun Weena, co-founder of the Thai Clean Air Network.
So if you want to hear what's being done to fight Bangkok's increasingly awful air quality, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok podcast.
Sawatdee krap and welcome to the Bangkok podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 with nothing but the clothes on my back and a backpack full of poutine, and has made a pretty good go of it so far.
Wonder how long that lasted you.
Not so long.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 20 years ago, fell in love with learning all the different ways to measure air quality, and never left.
Wait till they start measuring things like PM 2.1. PM 1.5. Just get more evil.
I'm an expert in this stuff now, and the main show today's interview will explain why.
Yeah.
So first, a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons got a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about my difficulty in keeping my students honest while doing online learning, Greg's fears of keeping his son safe while out exploring Bangkok, a 300 baht tourism fee that will be levied on incoming tourists, and talk of a 3-fold increase to ride the BTS Green Line.
Boo.
Boo, for sure, yeah. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
All right. Well, before we jump into this week's show, we want to mention the winners of our mask giveaway. Now, you might remember we asked listeners in Thailand to send us an email if they wanted a custom Bangkok podcast mask, and we chose some names from all the entries. So congrats to Timothy Engelese, Ming Jia Chow, David Gardner, John Pop, Tim Rind, Crystal Flepper, Phil Allen, Tim Bailey, Tim Hughes, Crypto Greg, sorry Greg, I can't remember your last name, and Kyle Salter. So everyone be on the lookout for these folks wearing a cool black mask from our friends at Style Seal with the even cooler Bangkok Podcast logo on the side. So congrats, everyone.
Yeah, pretty much the definition of cool, if you ask me.
That's right. That's right. All right, guys. Well, speaking of masks, on this episode, we are finally dedicating an entire show to the disgusting, unavoidable, unhealthy cloud of poisonous air that seems to blanket Bangkok every year about this time. And we are joined by an expert on the matter, Khun Weena, a financial economist and co-founder of the Thailand Clean Air Network, a multidisciplinary cross-organizational group of professionals that work to address the air pollution crisis and to drive policy change from the grassroots up. Good work they're doing. Not an easy task. And she and I met tonight to talk about it. So here is my conversation with Khun Weena. All right, Khun Weena. Well, welcome to the Bangkok podcast. First time we met today. It's very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet
thanks
you.
for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. So you are a co-founder of the Thai Clean Air Network.
That's right. Yes.
And this is a very appropriate time to have this conversation because this morning when I woke up, I checked Twitter to see if the world has ended yet. And then I checked the AQI app.
Yes.
And this morning when I woke up, the AQI, the air quality index, was about 157.
Yes.
And I checked this afternoon and it was 227, which went from bad to worse.
Yes.
And for those that don't know the app, the little graphic beside the 227 was purple with a guy wearing like a full-on hazmat gas mask. So the air today in Bangkok is awful. It's a very good representation of the problem that we have to deal with living here. But I've been in Thailand for 20 years and I don't remember this ever being a problem before 5 or 7 years ago. What's going on?
Apparently, with air quality, right? So there's about 6 different elements to it. And the one that is the most hazardous that people are aware of is PM 2.5.
Right.
So because it's the size, or it's very small. And it could really lodge very deeply into your body, right?
Right. Get into the tiniest little
Yes, that's right.
things in your lungs.
Yeah, and straight down into your bloodstreams and all that. And in fact, all parts of your body. The government has been monitoring this for about at least a decade. Unfortunately, they've never really inputted into the air quality index. And there was been a lot of push by civil society networks to try for them to do that 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, I think because of people being aware of how bad air quality has gotten in about early 2019, in 2018, early 2019, I believe that's when things got really bad and people sensed something was off.
Right.
And the government did come up and say, this thing that looks like this, like a beautiful haze out there, it's bad air quality, right? So that got people up in arms.
Right.
And people were complaining to social media. Suddenly, bam, they put it in. What I'm saying is that, to go back to your question, PM 2.5 is actually invisible to the eye. So it can actually be there on a very clear, beautiful day. You may not even know it.
Okay.
Today, it's probably bad too because PM 10 is probably equally as bad. That's what makes it hazy.
Oh, okay. So you see the PM 10.
But you don't see a 2 and 5 at all.
But you cough because of PM 2.5.
2 and 5 is the really deadly stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Not a PM 10 is not deadly, but 2 and 5 gets much deeper into the body.
Right.
Things have changed over the years, right? So when you say, well, why haven't you sensed this before? It's a combination of different things, right? So one of it is changes in global climates has affected it. Global supply chains have really affected all this too. It's a huge issue related to, if you look at the map of the world, as you see today, actually a lot of it is in Asia.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, well, why is it in Asia? Well, there's a lot of huge efforts in the past, right, to clean air globally. And if you look at where global factories have moved, most of them have moved to places like China and India.
Yeah,
right?
sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
low labor costs, all the rest of this. And then in 2017, of course, China also cleaned up their efforts as well, right? So, and so there's follow-on impacts on that. We've seen it in different ways, but people realize, that it is a problem. I think because of a combination of just the climate, global climate change, because of global supplies, manufacturing, we work with international organizations such as the World Resource Institute. One of the issues that was raised by them, they've studied this issues for so many decades, is people think of it as a local issue,
Right.
but it's not. It's actually a global supply chain issue when you think about it.
It's kind of like when you went back in the day when you went into a restaurant and they had a smoking section. But it was on one side of the restaurant. And you're like, well, there's no wall. It's just that's smoking and I'm non-smoking, but the smoke can still come over you.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
It's
Exactly.
like having a no noise section on one side of the room and the other side of the room is the noisy section. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, no, that is a great analogy. Yeah, exactly. It's the same sort of thing. Before we might have been as visible, but I think Bangkok, it's always been visible. You know how people always say this beautiful sunset in Bangkok, which today is a beautiful sunset, right?
Yeah.
All the oranges and the reds. It's air pollution. Yeah, seeing sun setting through air pollution. Just the awareness that, it's the effect of air pollution.
Yeah, well,
didn't dawn upon a lot of people, I would say.
The sunsets were beautiful after Krakatoa exploded and wiped out 1 billion animals. Anyway, so I also think that part of the problem is just the access to technology that we have. Like 7 or 8 years ago, I couldn't check my AQI app because I didn't own an iPhone. There was no such thing.
True.
Actually, the iPhone came out in 2007. So there was such thing. Don't correct me, listeners. But you know what I'm saying. So now there's just this easy access to information. Is that also part of the problem? Like just this sort of general awareness that has reached this tipping point where people are now saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a real problem.
Yes, definitely. I think access to information is definitely there.
Yeah.
For me personally, before, what I used to do is that there's a global website that brings together all the various air quality. And when I looked at some of the more official ones here, and it kind of seemed it was a bit off, I look at the international website, and that's when I realized, it's much worse.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, with Air Visual, they're upticked on the air monitoring systems in Bangkok. I think we're like the second or third largest place in the world that they're selling to. Because,
oh, really?
Yeah, because people are they are honestly just, the reliability of the data that's coming out officially is a bit wanting. So they've gone ahead and bought their own systems.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And so we've got a lot more data point than we ever had.
Okay.
So part of it is we weren't aware of it.
So the more information is a good thing. It's a double-edged sword. It's a great thing that we have all this information, but it's a bad thing because you can actually see the crap you're living in every day.
But if you know, at least you can protect yourself, right?
Yeah, right. Good.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I was not okay with not being given the right information.
Right.
And then, I'm a runner, and that's how I got really into all this, because, something was wrong, and I was having this splitting headache. It wasn't going away. And I was actually training for a marathon at that point, and I couldn't operate for about 2 weeks.
Really?
And then the news came out from the government saying, oh, this is air pollution. I was so livid. I was like, how can you do this, right? At the end of the day, if you give me the right information, I can protect myself, or if I choose not to, that's my choice. But I'm not okay with not having information, not to be able to protect myself and my loved ones. That was my beef, right? And then when things got really bad, fortunately for us, there are other active citizens who are professionals in their own right, and they want to do something. They have kids, they have, elderly people, or they themselves are unwell, or have. So a lot of us got together, and that's how we formed the Thailand Clean Air Network. We just are professionals. We're like, we have to do something, because if we keep it the way it is, we don't see a long-term solution. And the problem with Thailand is it is a systemic problem. It is very deep entrenched problem. It's linked to so many aspects. So then ultimately it's about economic growth, unbalanced economic growth, right? Prioritizing, more factories, more cars selling on the roads.
Growth at all costs, more trains, more construction, more high rises, more towers.
Exactly. More, yeah. Unlimitedly. And the problem is, and then, just case in point, yesterday was a whole discussion I was involved in, where I'm involved in a Zoom call meeting, and there was a whole talk about improving the air quality standards for Thailand, which was great, because I think it's been last time we changed this about 10 years ago. And the air quality standards in Thailand is very subpar, as people may know. Our levels for 24 hours, PM2.5, is 50 micrograms per cubic meters, whereas the WHO guideline is 25.
So it's
like
twice
double.
as worse? Or
twice as
half
bad.
as better? Right? I don't know how to say it.
Twice as worse, right? Because it means they won't, no action will be kicked in until it's above 50, technically.
Right, but the WHO says, hey, it should be above 25.
Yes. But not every country's at 25. The US is around 35. Some people at 27. But at least we're at 50, right?
How does that compare to other countries that are on the bad end of the scale?
There are some that are worse than us, but other countries that have at least plans to improve, right? If they're not quite there, they have plans to do this at so and so time. And I'm glad they're even thinking about it now. Finally, there's a lot of push for them to have done this, but it's still a bit lacking in terms of the actual action plans. But at least having a goal to improve is a good thing, because before there was no goal to even.
Well, Thailand is a land of baby steps.
Baby steps,
right?
Yes,
I think,
yes.
you're at least recognizing that, there is a little problem is the first step. And then maybe we should form a committee and we'll have a meeting, and then, but at least it's something.
Yeah,
it's better
it is moving. Yeah.
I want to talk about, get into more specifics of the Clean Air Network later on. But I remember a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. I'm getting old now and time sort of is a flat line. But there was a point where the AQI got up to 160. And people lost their minds. Schools were closed. Businesses were closed. Everyone was saying, don't go outside unless you have to. I woke up this morning and it was about 160 again. And no one said anything. Just, hey, air's bad today. Should I wear my plague mask or should I wear my air pollution mask? And that really is depressing, because people are just sort of okay with it now. It's not even worth talking about. And that's a bummer. So how do we keep the conversation going?
Oh, it's tough, and that's been quite a challenge for us, because what we wanted to let people know is we've looked at different clean air movements around the world, and ultimately, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the UK, or even in China, the movements have come about because of people saying, "Hey, enough is enough. We've got to breathe. We've got to have the right to life. Basically, this is what it is." But the challenge we're facing is that people look at air pollution as a chronic death, right? It takes a long time before you reach that point, whereas human nature tends to kind of freak out when the possibility of death is much closer to you. Right. So I think with COVID-19, people kind of see death in front of them, so they're very panicky about that, which is a good thing. But when it comes to air pollution, they kind of now downplay the risk, because it's all relative in their mind, which is sad, and it's hard because none of it is great, right? But it is something that affects you. And one of the things that I've actually shown is, right now, the fatality for Thailand, I think if I'm not off, is about 67 deaths, maybe a bit more today, I'm not sure, but it's about 67. Whereas for air pollution, the impact of air pollution in terms of fatality, there's been a global study that was done by the University of Washington together with the World Bank, and they looked at deaths directly related to air pollution.
Right.
Globally, and annually about 60,000 Thais are dying directly linked to air pollution. So that's the gravity of the change, the differences that we're talking about, right? I've tried to highlight that. And there's another point that I think Thais aren't fully aware of. It's because of the difference in air quality standards that Thailand opts to use.
Yeah.
Because our levels are so subpar relative to WHO guidelines, that Thais are dying earlier. So on average, Thais are dying 2-ish years earlier. And it varies by where you live in Thailand. So if you live up north where the air pollution is really, really bad, you're losing about almost 4 years of life.
So the average life expectancy for Thais is dropping, and it's directly related to air pollution.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, is there a cost to that? Of course there's a cost to this. It's huge, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a 2-point I wanted to hone in when people were talking about, we've got to balance various needs. Absolutely. You've got to balance the need to generate growth and jobs and whatnot. But at the same time, don't undermine the importance of health, because at the end of the day, there is no economy when when your employers are dying, when your customers are dying.
Population, right?
Yes, it's important, and we're an aging society too. So
I'm certainly feeling like an aging society myself.
Yeah, so that's a critical point that I think folks sort of miss when they look into this, and this is something that affects you because you can't really live without breathing. And the stuff that's going into your body is toxic. There's a study was done, I think, last year, the research that came out that said actually there's no ailment in your body that's not linked to the air that you breathe.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Right? It goes through every part of your body. Yeah.
So specifically to Thailand now, I've always said that in Thailand, anything goes until it becomes embarrassing for Thailand. And then you'll see it stamped out real quick. So I was sort of mulling over in my head the other day. Government inaction is a perpetual problem in every country for any issue. But what would really sort of kick things into gear, or at least make the problem something that might sort of jump higher up on the list of government priorities, is for foreign embassies to put out travel alerts to Thailand, even when there's no coup going on, saying like, by the way, the air is poisonous, so you might want to consider going somewhere else. I think, seeing as Thailand relies so heavily on tourism, that might be one element of maybe sort of turning the ship around. A small one maybe, but I think just sort of the foreign embassies or for overseas, government travel warnings for Thailand. Like Thailand's a great place to go. It's safe right now. There's no coups or anything, but the air is poisonous. Yeah,
that's a good idea. Actually, I think with the internet, and with the media being quite savvy, this day and age, I think that need has already been covered, because a couple of years ago, when things got really bad, and Chiang Mai hit the ranks as being the worst city in the world for air pollution.
It was like Chiang Mai and then Delhi, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was a write-up, I think, in the Washington Post or in the New York Times.
Right.
People all saw that.
Yeah.
And the reaction to that initially was like, oh no, we have to cover it up. Yeah. No, the tourists wouldn't come, and it's like trying to cover the sky with your hand, because people can check their own air quality and realize how bad it is in Chiang Mai. Yeah. So it's really sad because, the tourism is affected, and you can understand which tourists would want to come to a city and breathe toxic air into your lungs, right?
Yeah, let's go to the worst polluted city in the world.
And travel there, right? Yeah. So there has been an impact financially on the businesses there. And I think that's part of the reasons they do feel they want to resolve it, but the problem is that they don't want to touch it. It's a structural problem, as I was saying before.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's an easy problem to fix. It's a massive problem, but
it's a massive problem to fix, but they're fixing it in a very silly way, unfortunately, right? Like in Bangkok, you saw the way that they're just spraying water everywhere and all misty water to the point that you're
What is up with that?
It's like Songkran every day. I'm like, what are you doing?
What are your insights on that? Because from a layman's perspective, that has zero effect on anything. Is that scientifically?
No, it's not scientific.
Is it pure optics?
It is optics. It is optics.
For listeners that don't know, last year when the air was really bad, the government decided to go around spraying water into the air.
Yeah.
And they even mounted like little water sprayers underneath overpasses, so where you're driving along the street, and like it looked like they were doing something, but it was like the air quality equivalent of triple spacing a book report. Like it looks like something, but it's actually, there's not much there.
There isn't much there.
So it's just mystifying, because it's a complete waste of time and money, not to mention water.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't. Yeah, I think there's this myopic sense of doing whatever short-term quick wins kind of to get the optics right. This part is still there, but hopefully I think they've come to realize that you've got to do more. People are not going to be taken, you can't kind of, pull the wool over someone's eye on something like this.
Well, that leads into the next conversation, which we need to be a little bit careful talking about, because I think our listeners know, and you and I know, and you got to be careful what you say in Thailand.
Definitely.
So the problem to me seems to be enforcement, because a lot of this pollution is often the government comes out and says, like, we're going to take polluting buses off the road, and we're going to do this and this and this, and that's great. But that's not the main cause. I think everyone knows what the main cause is, and it's the burning. What's so hard about someone enforcing this? I mean, it might be difficult to talk about, but it seems like, you have authorities in Thailand, you have a police force, you have a government, you have regulations and laws. What's up?
Well, there are a couple of things, right? So source of air pollution, there's different things. So there's industrial pollution, there's biomass burning issue, there's vehicle pollution, there's transboundary haze, and there's urbanization, right? So those are sort of the key sources here in Thailand. And it varies a little bit by various regions of the country. Now, the issue that you're asking about, which is biomass burning, right? Biomass burning is quite related to the big agro industries. And that gets kind of pretty complicated, right? Because when you start dealing with agro industries, and then you deal with issues of contract farming, and then you get into this whole debate about clamping down on, small scale farmers. And so it becomes politically a bit difficult. So that's part of it. And I think the issue is a lot more, you got to have a lot more political will. So for example, some of the burning, they've tried to, for example, up north, when they tried to deal with the burning, they just decided, okay, let's go complete control and command. Let's say, thou shalt not burn, full stop.
Stand there with a stick in your hand, beating time to thump some heads if you burn.
Exactly. Now the problem is when you say thou shalt not burn, there are different types of burning. You've got to understand who's burning, why, and what. And some of the burning is done by people who are, ethnic hill tribe people. It's part of their culture, and they actually tend to do it during the time when the air pressure isn't so bad. Okay. So that's actually the best time to be burning, right? It's slash and burn agriculture, and that's part of it. So that's one element of it, and so that affects people in those groups. And what happens is, okay, you tell us thou shalt not burn now, so we burn earlier. And there's also the whole discussion about managing fuel. So managing, the amount of leaf and stuff in the forest as well, because once you don't manage this, a couple of years, as you've seen in Australia and so many other different countries, you get these massive forest fires.
Right, you're talking about controlled burning.
Exactly. There's also controlled burning. You need to have that in place as well. And then the other big part of it is the burning related to the agricultural groups, the big industry.
Right.
And that takes a lot of political will to have to deal with all that.
Right, because they're very big, very powerful, very connected organizations, and they're not really going to be bullied and pushed around.
It's a tough one. Yeah. So, and it's a very, we've looked into various, each of different sectors, and there's problems throughout the entire chain. And there needs to be someone who goes in and looks at solution that's a win-win for everybody across the entire chain. And that's where the role of government really needs to come in.
Right.
To really resolve this. Yeah.
What about burning in Myanmar and Laos and Cambodia? Is that completely, or are Thai authorities completely powerless to do anything about that?
There's a fair amount of documentation that some of it is quite kind of tied back to the big.
Great.
Yes, so you can actually manage that. And I think one thing that's quite a pity was that last year Thailand was the chair of ASEAN. And we were trying to see if we could actually push the issue of air pollution, transboundary haze specifically, into the ministerial levels, committee levels. And there was just no push for the government to do that. And it was such a wasted effort because you were the chair then, right? So there's no solution on this. So now the chair's moved to somebody else, right? Which is a pity. But I think with transboundary, the thing that everybody has to understand is that you don't actually have a seat on the table to be talking too much if you don't even have your own Clean Air Act. Thailand does not have a Clean Air Act at all.
There's no Clean Air Act at all?
None.
Really?
None. There's some regulations that affect different aspects that falls under different ministries. They're very dispersed, not integrated. There's nothing that controls air. And for me, I think out of all the various sources, the one that's most jarring and really needs to be addressed a lot is actually industrial pollution, because Thailand doesn't have emissions inventory. So for example, if a factory comes in and says, okay, hey, I want to set up a factory in Thailand, and you run through and get permits, they don't look at the total ambient air or the total attainment air, air within that area when they take a decision to say, yes, you can set up a factory and you can emit, A, B, C, D, E emissions out there. They're not looking at the total capacity, which shocked me because I thought someone must be looking at this holistically.
But they still need to do an EIA, right? An environmental impact assessment.
Oh, we can go into a whole discussion about EIAs in Thailand.
You can almost hear your eyes roll.
That's a whole other thing, but let's just say that's not a very airtight process in Thailand.
Okay, fair enough. So.
But for example, right now, there's about 3 to 4 different pollutants that factories actually need to provide information on. In the US, it's about 200 to 300, and the data is actually monitored real time. So you can open up the website of the US EPA, and if you're curious to know what that factory next to your house is emitting, you can actually see it, and you can see if it's above limits and for how long.
Right.
Whereas in Thailand, you don't have access to that
completely
information.
Opaque, right?
Oh, completely opaque. Yeah. And the government doesn't even know what's coming out of the smokestacks, right? And that's just jarring. It's just, okay, we don't know this. So
wow.
We should bare minimum have that data first. With that data, then we can match the air pollution and then understand what the source is. Because to solve this problem, you need to know the source, right? You need to understand, is it coming from A, B, C, or D? And right now, the official data for Bangkok specifically claims that a lot of it is vehicle pollution and biomass burning. And industrial factory counts for like 3%, 5%. And it just begs the question, right? Because Bangkok, if you look at the location of Bangkok, it's right at the Gulf of Thailand.
Yeah.
So naturally, where it's positioned, there's a lot of natural airflows coming through, right? So why are we getting this crazy amount of pollution? The different reasons, but if you look at the surrounding areas, right? So you've got Samut Prakan and Samut Sakhon. Yeah, both industrial factories. Right, and there's about 100,000 factories around Thailand. About 40,000 of them are around Bangkok.
40,000 factories around
yes,
Bangkok.
Around Bangkok,
Yikes. Right?
So when you say industrial factory makes up 3%, it kind of begs the question a bit, really? Is it seriously? And then the other element to Bangkok specifically is around urbanization, just the way the city's been growing. It's been growing very high. If you look at BTS stations right now, the stations are so big, it's coming next to these townhouses. So, when you look at it naturally, you're like, how's the air circulating? Well, it's not. It's not, because many years ago, there used to be a requirement in Bangkok, I don't know what's happened, where they don't allow very tall buildings to build right next to each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There used to be that under many governors ago. They're very strict about that. And that was great because it would allow the air to circulate through the city quite well. And I don't know what happened now. Now they don't seem to really be enforcing that. And that's a problem, right? And right now, Bangkok, it's like we're living in a construction site. I don't understand who would decide the infinite wisdom that every single bridge needs to be maintained right now. And, every single BTS and MRT all need to be expanded right at the same time. So obviously, traffic pre-COVID was really, really bad. Yeah. Right?
Well, it's a double-edged sword because I'm all for bringing Bangkok up to speed in terms of global cities, in terms of rail transportation and especially electric rail and things like that. Yeah. But the downside is that it's kind of a shit show to get there.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I'm just saying that you can do it gradually, right? You can actually plan it out. Or you can do it in phases, right? Yeah. But you do it all at the same time. It's like, hang on, who thought of that one? It has an impact, dang. Yeah.
So let's talk more about the Thai Clean Air Network.
Yeah,
You
sure.
said you founded it with a bunch of sort of like-minded people and citizens and organizations. What is your mandate, and what do you do?
In our group we're all professionals in our different fields. I have a fair amount of professionals who are in the field of academia. I have a medical doctor in my group. I've got environmental lawyers. I've got environmental economists, air pollution specialists, industrial pollution specialists, fire experts. We've got a mixed bag of people of different skills. Have all kind of came together and said, "Gosh, we've got to do something. We can't just sit here and do nothing, right? It's affecting our lives and everyone's lives." And really, our mandate is we sat around. We said, "Well, what can we do, right? What is the skill set that we bring to the table?" And it's our collective knowledge, because we when you look at air pollution, obviously it's such a complicated problem. It links to so many different sectors, right? It's an invisible killer. And it's, as I was saying, it's linked to a structural problem. So it does require everybody with the various skills to come together to work across discipline to come up with solutions that's going to work. And so we view ourselves more as somebody who has the knowledge base to work across different fields, across organizations. We all come from different organizations, and to come up with solutions. So what we've done is we've developed conceptual papers. So we've really looked at, we've taken the EU process of bringing legislation and developing 3 color-coded concept paper. So we've developed a white clean air paper, which really talks about the broader issues. This year we've issued the blue clean air paper, the clean air blue paper, which talks about the impact of air pollution. It's almost a 200-ish page document.
Wow. And
now we're in the throes of actually developing the clean air green paper, and this is a solutions-based paper.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it will touch on every sector. And it will have the final conclusion will actually be a multidisciplinary mixing of everything. So, so when you talk about a problem in one sector, if it impacts another, we want to bring in together solutions that deal with environmental solutions in terms of environmental law, in terms of economic solutions to these problems, and how to solve it from a policy perspective, how to solve it from a private sector angle, how to solve it from a civil society, what civil society can do to resolve this problem. Yeah. So we're moving it that way. And one of the key things that we did do was in August of this 2020, we already drafted the first citizen-driven Thai Clean Air Act for Thailand.
Wow.
So we've already got approval from Parliament. We're now in process of soliciting Thai signatories. I guess you're aware that in Thailand, if you have a minimum of 10,000 signatures, you can submit a legislation to Parliament for consideration. Right, to be endorsed as legislation. It goes through an entire process, but we're already at that point. We've already got a legislation out there, and the most challenging thing for us is COVID-19 has hit, and the thing with Thailand is when you do this process, it's very paper based. You actually have to bring a physical form. People have to sign it.
Don't even get me started on dealing with banks and their need for papers and signatures.
I know. So it's been really challenging for us because, people have to physically send in, if they're doing it at home, they would download the form and physically send it in and, mail it to us. And people are freaking out over COVID-19. No one's going to go to the post office, right? Yeah. So it's really tough. And beforehand, we had set up, booths every now and then for people to do this. And we've now developed sort of drop-off locations. So it's like 4 now we have in Bangkok where people can just go there. There's a form there. Just bring your national ID. They'll Xerox it and you leave them with them and they'll manage, sending it to us. But still, it's very challenging right now. Yeah.
And especially now in a lot of industries that, these construction industries and stuff like that. I mean, they're not very motivated to really get on board in a big way. It's like that old saying, you can't make someone understand something if their job depends on them not understanding it. Yeah. So it's an uphill battle. And that's not a Thai thing. It's just a general thing.
Yeah, true.
But like we said, Thailand's a land of baby steps. And
it
seems like you're making progress.
Yeah.
You just got COVIDed.
You just got COVIDed. But I think the other element to all of this is that we know that it's equally important, not just on providing the conceptual papers and all this, which is a very, very important part to supporting the whole draft law. I think we've done the most of the heavy lifting. The other part that's equally as important is actually there's a social movement. having people on board, having people really understand this, because ultimately it's a right to live. It's a right to breathe. And Thais don't kind of get it yet because it's relatively new to Thai people. They've never heard of PM 2.5. It's only in their vocabulary only 2 years ago. They don't.
But they've been breathing for a while.
But they didn't realize it, right? Is that awareness part of it, right? So I think now people, because people are stuck at home, they've been watching The Crown. So when you see that episode, in London, the reason why London was called the Big Smoke. There's a time when
I've never seen The Crown, but I know that the Industrial Revolution kind of.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution, 4 days, 12,000 people died.
Really?
That ignited change. Yeah, wow. That really, really ignited change under Churchill. So I think people kind of see that now, and they're like, they can kind of a little bit understand that. Okay, this can get really bad.
Right.
But it's a little bit of this. Unless something is real to you, you're not going to take action.
Sure, yeah. It's like climate change or anything.
Yeah.
Like I live right on the river, and I know I'm going to be underwater, and my son's going to be underwater in 50 years. But, what am I going to do? So some of our patrons, they get an advance notice when we have a guest on the show, and we ask them to send in some questions. So we have a couple of questions from our patrons here. So James says, is there a correlation between air pollution alert days and hospital admissions for asthma? Is pediatric asthma increasing with increasing air pollution levels over time? Seems like the cost of controlling air pollution could be offset by lower healthcare costs in a country with government-sponsored healthcare.
Yes, and the answer is definitely yes. So we've got a lot of medical doctors who we've spoken to, and they've definitely seen anecdotally, based on the patients that have come in. The sad part is that on the stats part of it, it's a little bit lacking, because apparently when you go to see a doctor's, let's say you bring a child in and the child's got asthma, it's gotten worse, during air pollution episodes, and they ask you about it. There's a box that they can tick to say, we think the doctor believes it's an environmental cause, right? They can do that tick. Apparently, some of the doctors have not been rigorous in maintaining the tick. And then on the medical data, specifically in Bangkok, I don't know why. The hospitals, you've got your private hospitals, you've got hospitals that fall under the Bangkok, the BMA, the Bangkok Metropolitan Administration, and you've got hospitals that fall under the Ministry of Public Health. And for some reason, the data doesn't really go, you can't get all of them to provide the data. So it's kind of a little bit embarrassing, but specifically Bangkok, right? When you want to do those analysis, and there was a drive, I think last year when they did this big study, and they were trying to pull together data to show this correlation, and they looked at various provinces. They decided to drop Bangkok because the data wasn't sufficient enough to be able to run these analyses. And I was like, oh my God.
From the capital city.
No. Data, clean, accurate data is still quite a problem, right? I mean, we're talking about really low-lying fruit, but definitely it's linked. You can talk to any doctor that can tell you that. In fact, actually, just 2 weeks ago, there was a doctor who was interviewed, and he was showing a case of his patient who is a very strong guy. He's a weightlifter. So what he does is he goes and exercises in his gym. And he came to see the doctor because he had problems with his lungs. And they did an x-ray of his lungs. And I was shocked when I saw the x-ray that's on this short video. And he was like, apparently he said, this is PM 2.5. The doctor's like, look, see how affected his lungs is.
Really?
And he was like, look at this. This is PM 2.5. And it's gone at least looked like about a quarter of his lungs were like quite badly affected. Nice. And the doctor was saying, I think this is lung cancer now. And he said, that's the thing. People think it's a chronic thing. I can tell you, based on somebody like this, who's strong, he's exercising in a gym, but he doesn't have air purified, because when you're exercising, you're breathing much more deeper, right? And this guy was breathing very deep, and he's only like, I think in his early 30s. It seems like he has lung cancer.
Wow, that's
I'm just
crazy.
Like, oh my God, right? Oh my God. And it can also manifest not just impacts on the lung, but where the blood goes. And apparently the blood goes up to your brain and to your heart. And there's a lot of people with chronic heart condition that's linked to this as well.
Jeez.
So it's linked to a lot of things, unfortunately.
It's depressing.
Depressing, I know.
Our last question is from Eric.
Sure.
And he says, I've always seen big cities in Southeast Asia as gold mines for any company or government that could set up the infrastructure for more electric vehicles, particularly two-wheeled vehicles. Most people don't drive anywhere near what a standard range for an electric scooter is. Can we expect to see Bangkok push greener forms of transportation in the near future? If so, would that be publicly or privately funded? And it would make the city a hell of a lot quieter too, which is Bang on, Eric. I hate those screaming crotch rockets that fly down the street and just, it's so annoying.
I know. It's a very noisy city, isn't it? It's hard to even talk to
I wear like in-ear headphones most of the time. And
right.
on the occasion where I have to walk outside without them, I'm like, damn, it's really noisy out here.
It is super noisy.
But it's a good point. Like
yeah.
there's even maybe not as much as like a city like Hanoi or Beijing or something, but electric motorcycles here are a no-brainer.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that. So we had ran a webinar series that started since actually April. We did April, and then we had a whole series around to November. And one of the sessions that we did was we talked about solutions to deal with this, and we brought people from different walks of life. And one was actually a company in Thailand that does produce electric motorcycles. And they shared with us what they did. It took them about, not wrong, 3 to 5 years to convince the government to allow them to actually license it so that, these, motorcycle taxis can actually be electric motorcycles.
Right.
I was like, oh my God. So they do exist. I'm not sure about the price point and the whole business case as to how they're doing it, right? But I think a lot of things with solutions that are green is that there's demand for it. And there's already a solution, but so long as the big players are not coming in, whether it's through government or big corporations are taking this on, you won't hit price parity. And if you don't hit price parity, it's never going to be a solution for the masses, and it will never go mainstream. So it's that's like the problem. Circle, right? It is a very bad vicious circle. For example, in the issues of buses, right? They were talking about having clean buses forever, I think since I was born. Right?
Yeah.
And there's always been some problem with it. I don't know why. For their infinite wisdom, they cannot deal with this, right? And this definitely should be a solution. The other problem too that people, when we talk about electric, it all sounds good, right? But the other problem that you don't think about is, well, what is the source of energy in Thailand, right? And
coal.
And again, yes, coal and gas that's running out, right? And renewable is not, unfortunately, a huge part of the energy mix in Thailand yet. So, for a country like Thailand, it's still coal dependent and dirty coal. We're talking about lignite, right? Is that really environmentally friendly, right? So this is where systemic thinking through the entire process really does need to come into play.
We've got to get a solar expert on to ask him why every building in Thailand is not covered on the top with
I know, given where we are relative to the equator, I know. I've done deals on rooftop solar, which should be a no-brainer solution, right, for urban electrification. But this is it hasn't really taken off. In our group, actually, for working on the solutions, we actually do have a renewable energy expert who will be writing specifically on energy.
Good.
So we will have that angle covered as well.
Well, Weena, thanks so much for chatting. Where can people find out more about the Thai Clean Air Network? So
we have a website called Thailand Can. CAN stands for Clean Air Network. So thailandcan.org. So all the material is in there.
Okay.
The two documentation that I told you about, the Clean Air White Paper and the Clean Air Blue Paper, we have actually translated both into English.
And the upcoming green paper?
The green paper is being worked on right now. So
cool.
Yeah, when it's completed, we will try to find means to translate that to English as well. Yeah. We're a very small group. So, we're always open to ideas, help, suggestions. If anybody wants to get involved, please, let us know. We have got an email. I think it's on our website as well.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the good work you're doing. Baby steps are still steps. And, I know it must be frustrating sometimes, but keep at it.
Thank you.
And I guess all I can say is wear a mask and breathe shallow.
Breathe shallow.
Weena, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, man, that is a timely interview for sure. It's amazing how timely that is, because I woke up this morning, dude, and my eyes were practically swelled half shut. I had a really sore throat, and it's the air for sure.
Right.
So 1 year ago wasn't too bad, wasn't it? It was 2 years ago that it was really bad, right?
I think so. Yeah.
That's right. Right. Yeah. 2 years ago, it was so bad that I honestly was thinking I might have to leave Bangkok. I mean, I was having a really hard time. And that's when we got into the whole air filter thing. And I did my whole do-it-yourself air filter. We talked about it on the show. Right. I had to seal my bedroom and make these do-it-yourself air filters. And it actually worked. And I bought an air quality monitor, and I got the air quality in my bedroom at a reasonable level. That was the only reason I survived 2 years ago.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and I don't think actually I've told you about this, Ed. But we actually coincidentally, completely separate from my conversation with Khun Weena, a few days ago, I got an email from Carl at smartairfilters.com. That was the website that you has sort of researched for your experiments.
That's right. You know, to refresh people's memory. So, high quality air filters machines are, number one, they're quite expensive, but in the midst of this crisis, a lot of them were sold out. So it's like, so Bangkok just went on this buying frenzy. So I went to all these department stores and I couldn't buy a proper air purifying machine, like an air purifier. So I got online and there's this do-it-yourself community, and it sounds silly, but basically, if you buy the right type of fan that is sealed and structured in a certain way, and you more or less stick just a filter on the front of it, it's about 95% as good as these high-end machines.
Right, like it's not rocket surgery, right? Like
right,
the air go from here to there through this thing.
Through the filter, yeah.
There's your air filter.
Yeah, and so I found this website that is, I don't know the exact deal, but they seem to be, they do sell stuff, but it seems to be more of a nonprofit. Like they're more like, they're like clean air evangelists, and they really try to help people find a cheap way to purify the air.
Right. Well, I just got an email so totally randomly from Carl, who actually knows Khun Weena, and
oh wow,
so,
okay.
I mean, listeners should go and check out the Thailand Clean Air Network website. Anyway, but also if you have questions or if you want to do some more research into it, then check out smartairfilters.com. Like you said, Ed, there's a ton of stuff there to get you going.
Yeah, that's what I used.
A lot of information there.
Yeah, they basically told me the type of fan I should buy and then the type of filter to use.
Yeah,
and in my case, I literally just taped it on, duct tape. Duct tape
it was a
can be used
pretty
for
ghetto
anything.
setup you had.
It was ghetto. It was ghetto, but it worked. I mean, I was shocked because I bought a fairly expensive air quality monitor. A fairly expensive thing. I think it was about $100,
right.
3,000 baht, and you could just see the numbers go down. So it's like it's measured whatever. Then you turn the filter on. I have my bedroom sealed, and it just goes down and goes down. It worked, man.
Cool. Well, I think the sort of summation of the conversation that I had with Khun Weena was that progress is being made, but it's a very complicated problem, and it is a problem that's going to take a long time to sort out. But many thanks to Khun Weena for coming on the show and her organization, which is doing some great work. So,
wait a minute, Craig. Are you saying that just spraying water into the air, that's not going to solve the problem?
You heard us laugh about it on the show.
I mean, it's just, you already went through it on the show, so we don't have to talk about it again. But it's just so silly. It's one of the sillier things I've seen the Thai government do. It's
so emblematic of just bureaucratic failure. Well, it works on my body in the morning. Why wouldn't it work on the air?
Good way to put it.
All right. Well, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with, no matter how we feel about it. And this week, Ed, it's all you.
Okay. I'm going to throw something at you. It's kind of general, and I don't know how much experience you have, but I'm just curious what your opinion is, what you think. What's your take on Thai wine, wine that is made in Thailand, not imported? I think a lot of it comes from just north of Bangkok, like around Sawatdee. There's a whole bunch of wineries. It's kind of like the Thai wine region. I've been there a few times. I've had, I'm not going to mention any brand names, but I've probably had 4 or 5 of the top brands, and I have an opinion. And so I'm just curious what your take is on Thai wine.
Well, first, let me get it before I give you my opinion on wine. Let me tell you, years and years ago, I was hired to be the restaurant critic on this website, this Bangkok website. And I did a bunch of reviews for a few months, and eventually it dawned on me that I am a terrible food critic because everything tastes awesome to me.
Right.
You could put a filet mignon on a plate in front of me, or a Big Mac, and I'd be like, well, they've both got their pluses and negatives.
So you don't have a discerning palate.
I don't, and with that in mind,
you're an eater. Basically, you like to eat. That's it.
I do, and I'm not a big drinker, but I've had some Thai wine, and I'm not an aficionado by any means, but I've had some okay Thai wine. Most of it, I think, is probably a little bit subpar. Some of it is good enough to drink. So I'm going to have to go live with on this one.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to issue one caveat before my opinion is that it's probably been about 5 years. So I a couple different times I've tried to get into Thai wine. I think I probably did it like in 2005 and 2010. Like every 5 years or so, I give it a whirl. Every 5 years or so, I give it a whirl. But it's been a while, and I think it sucks.
Yeah,
I think it's really bad. And again, I probably drink more wine than you do, but I'm not an aficionado. I'm not like a picky wine person. I mean, I have brands that I like, and I do have opinions about wine, but I'm definitely not an expert. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the climate, the grapes, or what. I mean, we've talked before. I hate the huge import tax on wine.
Yeah,
I hate it. And I would love for there to be a great local wine industry. That would be incredible. But on top of it, in my opinion, not being very good, it's also not that cheap. You think like the local wine would be like dirt cheap, but
right.
It's not. In general, it's not dirt cheap.
Well, I do remember having Thai wine a couple of times that I thought was really good.
Oh, really?
Most times I've had it, it's been like, it'll do.
Well, like I said, I can't say that recently I've done any taste testing, and so obviously it could have gotten better. I mean, the industry is not that old. I mean, I don't think those wineries have been around more than 20 years or so. So maybe our listeners, maybe I'll put out a call to our listeners if you can recommend any Thai brands of wine, in particular ones that are not that expensive, because it's kind of frustrating when there's this huge import tax on foreign wine, and then you go to buy Thai wine and it's not much cheaper.
Right. You're just going to why not pay a few bucks more for something that you know you're going to like?
That's right. So I'm not dissing the effort. It's just every time I've gotten into it, I've been disappointed. So any recommendations out there, I'd appreciate it.
Maybe the industry just hasn't yet had time to mature, like, say, a fine bottle of wine does.
That's right. That's very excellent segue there. You figure like France and Italy, they've only been like making wine for like 1,000 years. That's all.
Yeah. We've got a ways to go.
Thailand's got about 20 years.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm gonna have to go loathe.
All right, fair enough. But there's the good thing about this. There's always more research to be done.
That's right. Always more drinking to do.
That's right.
Okay. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
That's right. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can chat with us online, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter or Insta, where I'm BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. Wear your masks, please. And we will see you back here for hopefully a clean air week.
Absolutely.
But that's back when like Pibun Songkram was in charge, and he was creating pad Thai and changing the name of Thailand back to Siam and all this stuff.
Right.
A decade of change.
Actually, you should say that again. You said he was changing the name back to Siam, but that's wrong. He was changing the name from Siam to Thailand.
Oh, really? Okay, let me say it again. So yeah, that was back during the time that Pibun Songkram was in charge, and he was creating pad Thai and changing the name of Siam back to Thailand, and it was a time of change back then.
Okay, it's up to you. You can leave that in, but he wasn't changing it back to Thailand because it was never Thailand. He was creating the new name.
Fuck. All right.
Which was kind of, he wants the country to be like, this is for Thai people, Thailand.
Okay. All right.